Riding in the limousine, she looked at the people who appeared and disappeared from her field of vision and thought that there were so many different necks in this world. Thin, strong, old, and young. And if she could only put a collar on these necks and make them obey her, what would it be like and what would it look like? The woman's name was Han Ju, and she was the founder of Julu, and when she arrived at her destination, she was met at the entrance by two men who asked if she was here to visit them today, assuring her that a new handsome man had appeared in their establishment. But she was not interested and simply asked to be led to the door. At her back, one of them asked her not to be so cold, to which the other stopped him, claiming that she was a frequent guest at Change, their top man, Wang Shun, who was meeting her inside at the moment, and it was not worth bothering her once again. Change is a women's place where you can have a drink and a chat with the hosts, and the current top one assured me that he did not expect the lady to come to him on a weekday because he was incredibly happy right now, and so he asked if she was not busy with work today. The woman was upset, and after a moment of reflection, she said that her blind date had gone badly again, and the other party said that she treated him like a dog, which is why he left her. At that moment, the partner was unusually angry and asked if she could flirt or say something nice at all. A woman who does not clearly understand her place and at the same time goes on a blind date will die alone. And at the moment, Han Ju, out of grief, was getting drunk again, sincerely not understanding why they all left her after a few meetings, and host asked why they had to walk blindly and whether it was bad to love freely. The heroine assured that she simply did not have the opportunity to fall in love freely, as he simply did not know the situation of her family, and therefore she needed to find a person like her so that she could work with a calm soul. In any case, she had never loved anyone, not even as a child, except for... At this point, the woman became embarrassed and asked me to forget what she was saying. She was already thinking that something was wrong with her, and maybe she had some kind of psychological illness that made her not attracted to men, and she did not know what to do. Anyway, the interlocutor said that he would help her, and then she asked him to stretch out his hand, after which she took it and turned it sharply, causing pain, after which the man said that the woman had some sadistic tendencies, but it seemed that he also enjoyed it. Han Ju immediately began to apologize for this, as this kind of thing should be done with mutual consent, and if he was not happy about it, she should just say so, to which he convinced her that it was okay, as it was their duty to make guests happy. And so, if it would help her relax, she could continue. A moment later, another woman at the next table asked the man to come over to her, as she had ordered an expensive drink for him, after which he apologized, as he had to go to another table, but he promised to return soon. The heroine was alone again. In thought, she couldn't understand why flirtatious women were so lucky, and even relationships bought for money were the same. But even if she already knew the rules, there was still no feeling of envy, because she also didn't feel disgusted by such a cold and indifferent self. That day, she had been drinking too much and fell asleep right on the bar, so Wang brought her to the hotel, after which he kindly gave her water, assuring her that she had been drinking but that everything was fine now, and that she should get some rest, and he would leave as soon as possible, as he had urgent business. But suddenly the woman grabbed hold of him, asking him not to go anywhere, to which he apologized, but since it was a special day, he had to go, and he tried to gently pull away from her arms. The heroine had heard that only women have special days, but this was the first time she had heard that men also have special days, so she hugged him tightly, saying that he would not be able to deceive her. Suddenly he grew animal ears, and he began to realize that it was getting out of control, so he took off his shirt and tried to run away, and the heroine looked at him and realized that she had no experience with the opposite sex, and even if she flirted, she still couldn't hold a man, but his neck was so beautiful as well. When the heroine saw the ears, she immediately cheered up. The man saw it, and was scared that the transformation had started before time, so he assured her that a person cannot have animal ears, and she just thought it was because of alcohol, as she was very drunk tonight. But she didn't believe it, so she decided to touch it to check, and accidentally she slipped, pulling the man with her, and at that moment they were on the bed, and she saw that his eyes were like those of a wild beast, and in a moment he said that he was very sorry, and he couldn't take it anymore, and at that moment he was enveloped in blue energy, and in a moment A giant wolf was already lying on the woman, and the shocked Han-ju just looked at him, but she wondered if he was still in his right mind. But there was no fear of this creature. Trying to figure it out, they looked at each other for a minute, and the werewolf assured them that everything was fine with him, and he was not going to harm the woman, so he asked them not to call the police. Realizing the whole situation, the drunken woman relaxed and then began to touch the wolf's fur, asking why it suddenly became so fluffy, and at that moment she was seized by the desire to hug it tightly. When she was a child, it was often difficult for her to stay at home, so she liked to climb over the high wall of a nearby shelter because there was a little puppy waiting for her behind the wall, which she loved very much. And at the moment, the wolf was convincing him that he was not fluffy at all, and Miss Han was just sleeping, and when she woke up tomorrow, everything would be the same as it was. And in his mind, he wondered why this woman did not run away like the others when they saw a monster like him, and there was something wrong with her. The heroine lightly believed that it was all a dream, and so she decided that there was nothing strange about seeing a puppy, and in a moment, she turned him on his back, saying that if it was all a dream, then she could do whatever she wanted, and he would not dare to interfere with her. She started touching his ears, claiming that she had wanted to look at them up close for a long time, and then even bit him, and he opened his mouth to scream. But she took him and started examining his mouth, surprised by the sharpness of his teeth and how different it was from the human structure. All this time, the werewolf allowed her to control him, afraid to use force, since the body of an animal does not control force well, and if he resisted, he could harm her, which he did not want to do. The heroine, meanwhile, finished examining the wolf's body and saying that a dog is really better than a human, kissed him on the nose, at which point he stopped her, saying that she shouldn't do it, that such things as a kiss should only be done with a loved one, and he himself was not worth it. In the morning, she had a terrible hangover and remembered little of yesterday's events, thinking that she had gotten drunk in a bar last night and then was taken here by Mr. Van, who was supposed to leave her alone. She also vaguely recalled a werewolf, but after a moment she convinced herself that it must have been a hallucination, and she had simply drunk too much, since a person could not become an animal under any circumstances, although she caught herself thinking that she attached some importance to it. After that, she called the institution yesterday and asked to make an appointment with Mr. Van that evening, deciding that she needed to see him first and then collect some evidence. But they told her that her husband was on vacation from today and would not be able to receive guests, and this surprised her because she had never been there on weekdays. She did not know when he usually went to work. She was informed that this whole situation with Mr. Van was special, as his vacation usually lasts for 2 days, and he would be in the institution the day after tomorrow, and this confused the woman, as it was all too strange. A few days passed, and Han-ju was on the phone with her mother, who wondered why she had once again ended her relationship with a potential groom, since there was no one better than the gentleman from the Lee family, and it was impossible to be unsatisfied after that. The heroine claimed that she was not the one who was unhappy. It was the other party who left her, and this was confirmed by her mother, who said that Miss Lee told her that the woman was not at all interested in a potential partner, and she did not take the initiative, did not ask how he was doing, and so on. Boys now prefer caring girls. The heroine assured that she really got up very early every day to say hello and answer all the messages, but since the person still thought she sounded cold, she could not do anything. And while her mother was accusing her of not trying to find a husband, there was a knock at her office. A woman named Xiao Shan, who was the secretary and also the heroine's best friend, came in and said that the working day was over and that they could go out for a drink, and hearing the phone conversation out of the corner of her ear, she asked if her mother was trying to manipulate her again. The heroine assured us that she couldn't do anything about it, but lately she had something she really wanted to know about, so she wouldn't drink tonight, and for the same reason, she would go first. Meanwhile, 2 men were having a rest in the establishment, and out of the corner of their eye they spotted Van Shu, and they were surprised to see him, as he had not been seen for the last few days, to which the second man said that he had a very flexible schedule, and so it was a common thing for him. He noticed that being a favorite is very good, but for some reason he sits too far away from the guests, and this is an indicator of unprofessionalism. But that was his style, and many clients actually liked his cool tone. Van Shu was only pretending to be so cold, even though he is doing the job of taking care of people. And at that moment he appeared himself, thus making the men scared. And at that moment he asked one of them for perfume, as he had run out. The employee gave him his without hesitation, asking if Miss Han was here, and receiving an affirmative answer, he walked on, and the men continued to whisper among themselves, as if this young rich woman had made him number one in this establishment, and everything he had achieved here was mainly thanks to her. They heard that Van had a very hard time when he first came here, and if he hadn't met his sponsor, he wouldn't have been able to rise so quickly. And so even though he looks indifferent to everyone, he prepares himself the most every time he meets that woman. Van listened to all of this, realizing that it was most likely true, that he had a different body from the birth than ordinary people, and he could not be considered an ordinary person. He could not get medical care to go to school or get a stable job, and so he could only get into this institution. 3 months ago, he was attacked by workers from this establishment, accusing him of not saying a word, but his ability to seduce women is phenomenal, and so they were going to beat him up, but to do it gently, because the owner would not tolerate problems, and so it was not worth making a scandal. The man restrained himself, realizing that if he answered now, he would not be able to control himself, and at that moment, the heroine came, asking if the toilet was here. They said that the toilet was down the hall, and if necessary, they would take her. After that, she pointed to the victim, ordering him to take her away, and now he was waiting for his rescuer, and when they said she had come, he went there, not paying attention to anyone. He remembered the past, which made him feel bad, and that woman who had seen him turn into a beast, but still dared to come here, and when they met, she greeted him, calling him Mr. Fluffy Ears. Hearing this, Van sweated, recalling that he had said that it was all a dream, and that they should sit down, and the heroine suggested that they find a secluded place because she wanted to talk to him today, and it would not be good if someone else heard, so they decided to leave. When he came to a suitable place, he offered her something to drink, as he realized that she did not believe that it was all just a dream, and her attitude towards him was different from usual, and surprisingly, it caused only a warm feeling. Mrs. Han said that alcohol would only hurt them, so tonight they would just have orange juice and something to eat. Then remembered that they didn't serve anything but alcohol here. The heroine said that she came here as soon as the working day was over, as she was afraid that he would suddenly disappear. And after a moment of silence, the man said that he would not run away, as there was no place where people like him could work, and therefore he would continue to work here as long as he could. The visitor asked him if he really didn't have enough money, and he confirmed, adding that he wanted to work enough for an early retirement, at which point the waiter brought them drinks, and he asked them not to drink yet, as it was cold, and if she didn't eat, she would feel nauseous in her stomach. A minute later, he brought sandwiches and asked her to eat them first, which surprised the heroine, since sandwiches were not on the menu, and Van assured her that he had prepared them for dinner, and since the booth was quite far away, it did not attract attention, and she could eat in peace. After looking at the food for a moment, the woman asked if Mr. Van was being so kind and friendly to all the guests, to which he assured her that it was just professionalism, and after saying that, the woman's face suddenly changed, and he noticed that she looked upset. Finishing the drink, the heroine gathered her strength and asked her partner to seal the deal. She said that she had thought it would be easier. She thought that the more she interacted with men, the faster she would learn how to deal with them. But it seems that loving her is not so easy, and that is why she was abandoned again. And in this case, if he needs money and she needs a guy who can shut her family up, then why shouldn't everyone get what they want? The grim man asked if she wanted him to just pretend to be her boyfriend, and she confirmed it, adding that it should be easy for a professional like him. After a little thought, Van asked why it was him, and the heroine did not hesitate to assure him that she just liked furry animals, adding that there was nothing to worry about, as once the contract was signed, she would not say a word to anyone about the animal. The woman said that in this case, if the contract was signed, Mr. Van would not have to hide his transformation from her, and at that moment, she bit him on his outstretched hand, saying that it was really up to him to agree or not, and if he was not interested, she would not bother him anymore, and then she would go about her business. Van asked if he refused, Miss would not come here again, and she confirmed this, adding that it was not nice to be intrusive, and in any case, she told him to add her number, and if he wanted to sign, he could contact her at any time. The man briefly replied that this was not necessary. The heroine thought a bit, and then agreed, adding that he was already number one here, and the hourly rate was very high, even if he had to look for another host bar. He grabbed her hand and said he would sign it right now. He said he didn't need to think about it, and he had already decided that he would sign it here on the spot, so there was no point in going anywhere else. Later, they were signing the contract at the hotel, and she was sincerely surprised that the man had agreed so quickly, which meant that he needed money. And it turned out that Mr. Van was indeed her name, and he was 2 years younger than her. Having finished with the documents, the woman said that in this case, there would be no problems, and she was ready to pay by the hour. And all he had to do was come to her house after work and treat her as his girlfriend, so that in public everything would look natural, and no one would think that it was all fake. He agreed, adding that he could visit in the morning, as the facility is usually open from 4 to 12 a.m. The heroine objected, explaining that she had to go to work during the day and only had free time in the evening. Judging by this, the only suitable time to meet is on weekends, and so she suggested meeting in the morning on her day off, and in the evening he would go to work as usual, and it would be nice if he waited for her until she finished work by 7 o'clock to have dinner on his day off. Van said that, as she might have guessed, he only had to take days off on transformation days, when he looked more like a monster than a beast. And in his mind, he had already realized that she was really obsessed with learning to be with men, from the first time they met at the institution. When he saw her off after the beating, she asked him if he gave the local boys money. They would not get rid of the client, and this sincerely surprised the man, and he replied that if you just go to their establishment, they will all treat their clients like princesses, and they will never get rid of people. After that, turning away, Van assured her that a suitable host would be ready in a few minutes, and she suddenly asked him if she could choose him as today's partner, since the others were not of much interest to her at the moment. A surprised and insecure man asked if girls shouldn't prefer strong and bright men who look like princes, to which she assured him that it was not necessary. And I am a woman who likes to see men hurt, crying, or completely broken, and she was one of them. And at the moment, turning into a monster did not cause her any problems at all. As she had explained earlier, she is not a normal person, so presumably monsters would be better than people. And in other words, she likes monsters. After all, since childhood she was only interested in dogs. The man denied this statement, assuring her that she could not recklessly make promises like that. And she took him by the face and assured him that if he thought it was because of alcohol that night, he was very wrong. And so the heroine offered to transform right now to see if she would be afraid of him. Van said that until the time came, he would not be able to transform, and at that moment he suddenly felt sick. He could not understand why it was happening again, as he had just rested, but for some reason he could not control his body again, and so apologizing he tried to walk away as far as possible. The heroine grabbed his hand, thinking that he wanted to break the contract, and claiming that they hadn't discussed everything yet, after which tentacles suddenly appeared from the man's body, tore the clothes over them, and shocked them both with such suddenness. She wanted to go over to help, but the werewolf forbade her to do so, saying that for some reason the changes had started again. His form did not understand any rules, and having turned into a monster, although he had retained most of his mind, he still inherited a bit of his behavior, and so it was dangerous. Now he was ordering her to run away from here. He had never seen such a form before, and therefore he could not fully adapt to it, having understood the situation. The heroine assured him that it was nothing to worry about, and she would keep a safe distance, after which she asked if there was anything she could do to help him. Van said that he did not need any help now, and it would be better for her to protect herself. His limbs were divided into many parts, and they were all uncontrollable, and at that moment they wrapped around her leg, and the man was overcome with fear. He would not forgive himself if he somehow harmed her. After that, the heroine suddenly grabbed the tentacles with her hands, assuring that she shouldn't worry about it. They didn't look hostile, and it seemed as if they liked being caressed, but still Van warned that she should be vigilant, as he couldn't feel all the nerve endings, and now they were moving in a strange way. The woman had asked not to worry about it, as it would stay as far away as possible if it felt threatened. But now it seemed that even if you mocked them, the tentacles would still be obedient. With the help of the heroine, the werewolf was able to get up, saying that even when she was wrapped up, she still dared to approach. And it should be said that she was extremely brave, because other people would have run away after seeing the whole situation. Han calmly told him that they were just pieces of meat, and there was nothing to be afraid of. And then she asked if his body still hurt, and wondering how she knew all this, the man assured her that nothing hurt him anymore. His bones no longer felt tight, and it seemed that only his lower body had changed. Under normal circumstances, such changes would take at least 12 hours, but today the changes were quite sudden, and so he could not say how long it would last. And in this case, he recommended that the heroine go home and rest, and he would handle it himself. But she said lightly that she would not go anywhere, as this was a great opportunity to prove that even if Mr. Van was on shift, they could still meet, and she still needed to learn how to take care of others, so she thought it was a good chance to practice. Earlier, because she was working, even when her potential fiancé was sick, But after a moment, the woman stopped and assured me that I shouldn't talk about it, as no one would be interested. And in any case, as a couple, they need to take care of each other. And if one party invests too much and the other too little, the learning goal will not be achieved. And so now she was going to go extend the lease on the room and let it lie there. But the tentacles did not want to let her go. The man turned away at that moment, saying that he should not look at him like that, and that he could not do anything about it. The heroine turned to the tentacles, assuring them that if they let her go now, then after she returns, they will be able to wrap her in any way they want. If they want to wrap themselves around, twist or touch her, then everything will be possible. And at that moment they began to twitch happily, and from the outside it looked as if she had found a common language with them. As if understanding her, the tentacles began to release the woman easily, after which she happily went to the phone, and Van looked at her all the while, and could not understand how the body, which was usually restless for a long time, suddenly became so obedient. Suddenly he realized that he could communicate with them, and so he ordered them to stay still and calm down, but it was useless. They did not listen to him, thus disturbing him further. When Han finished, she said that she had made arrangements with everyone, and if he didn't recover by tomorrow, she would extend it for another day. But in any case, she still had to work today, so they would go to bed early tonight. When she returned, the man was still lying on the bed, and was surprised that she had really decided to stay here. The heroine confirmed this, adding that she should have rented another room, but since she had promised those kids, she could not break her promise. The woman fell asleep on a separate bed, and the werewolf just looked at her, and at the tentacles that continued to wrap around her. He realized that she really hadn't changed at all, and remained the same as he remembered her at the time of their last meeting. 18 years ago, when the girl first found the dog behind the wall while he was sleeping, she also fell asleep right on top of him, and when he woke up, he immediately began to wake up the guest, asking if she was new experimental material and why she had come to this area in the first place. She was only 8 years old at the time and did not understand what was going on, assuring her that she had just climbed over the wall. The dog was very surprised that she had managed to climb such a huge wall, and at that moment, she noticed that the dog could talk. Realizing his mistake, he immediately tried to correct himself by barking like a dog, to which the girl calmly stated that even if he learned to bark now, she would not lose her memory, so it made no sense. Accepting defeat, he asked her to leave quickly, as there was a research institute here, and he did not allow outsiders, and if she was caught, she would be in trouble, so it was worth leaving this place before anyone knew about her. The heroine said that there were no signs outside that it was forbidden to be here, and since she had run away from home, she did not want to return. The dog was shocked by this behavior, saying that it was not allowed, and inside the walls there were only monsters who needed injections and medicines every day, and he was also a monster. At that moment, he decided that he had to scare her, otherwise she would be investigated by evil people, just like he was. And so he stood up on his hind legs and said with an evil expression that he would eat her, hoping that this would be enough to make her run away from here and never come back. Surprisingly for him, the girl was not afraid, but rather put her palms to his paws, and in a moment, grabbing them with her hands, she suddenly threw him over herself and threw him to the ground with all her might. Lying on the ground, he wondered why it hurt so much, and so suddenly, at that moment, a happy girl stretched out her hand to him, asking him to calm down, introducing herself as Xiao Ji. She claimed that she was very strong and no monster would eat her, so the monster's brother need not worry about him harming her. Although she lost her memory and became a complete stranger, she was never afraid of him because of these mutations. But now he has lost the right to be near her again. The next morning, when the heroine woke up, she didn't know where she was, and when she saw Van sleeping, she remembered that last night, after his transformation, they had stayed here, and now she didn't know if he was better. She tried to stand up, realized that her body was not moving, and lifting the blanket, she saw the tentacles, which were even more numerous than yesterday. Wondering why they were still under her clothes, she asked them to let go. At that moment, Mr. Van woke up, asking if she was awake, and the woman, embarrassed, said she was glad he had woken up so early, because the tentacles, which had been quite obedient yesterday, suddenly stopped obeying today. He began to feel everything from the tentacles, and at that moment they began to wrap around her body even more, and the man turned away and apologized, as he had already said yesterday that he could not fully control them. But the synchronization had been going on all night, and most likely now he would be able to distinguish the movement of each tentacle, and therefore he needed to be patient a little more. His body had begun to gradually adapt to the mutations, but still they were wrapped around his instincts. But they should be connected to his mind at least a little bit, and at this point he began to check each of the tentacles separately, and it was very embarrassing. Since they were also parts of his body, it felt like he was stroking a woman with many hands, and at this point, she asked him to hurry up, as she had gotten into some very bad places, so it was worth ending it as soon as possible. If they had already decided to pretend to be lovers, the heroine already knew that she could not avoid intimacy. But the feelings of such games were too embarrassing for her, and at one point, she had already decided that if nothing was left, she would break the tentacles. But in a moment she repelled this thought, as then it would harm Mr. Van. The concentrated man, meanwhile, had reached the last limb. He just had to unite them all, and then he could let her go. And when he felt it, he realized that he could not control it, and meanwhile it was approaching her head, and he shouted to her to beware. But nothing terrible happened, and the tentacle gently touched her cheek, as if kissing her, and she decided to do the same in return. And when she kissed, all the sensations were transmitted to the man, and he blushed greatly. At this point, the limbs began to retreat from the heroine, and she thought that Mr. Van had finally managed to tame them. But in a moment, the tentacles turned back into normal human legs, and no one understood how it happened. Since he was born, he had never had such a sudden recovery in the middle of a transformation, and so both the beginning of the transformation and the end now seemed to be connected, which was rather strange, and yet he did not know the reason for it. On her way back to work, the heroine was still thinking about it. She didn't know the reason, and there was no need for it now, because it was the only time she had been late in the last 2 years, and fortunately, Mr. Van only goes to work in the afternoon. The fact that there are people in the world who can transform confused the woman and at the same time touched her. And at that moment, a concerned secretary came up to her and assured her that the heroine's mother had come here this morning. Realizing that her mother was already here, the heroine was confused for a moment, but gathered her strength and went inside, wondering why she hadn't warned her about the visit and had come so suddenly because no one was expecting her. The woman was sitting in a chair drinking tea, and she assured me that it was normal to show up suddenly to check on branches. Otherwise, she would not have been able to catch the CEO asleep, right in her place. The heroine, uncertainly, claimed that she had not overslept, and it was just a sudden situation, as her friend had health problems. And while she was saying this, her mother noticed a wound on her wrist that looked like a cut. Hanju had not noticed it before, realizing that most likely this mark was left by Mr. Van's tentacles, and the older woman was angry when she saw it, asking who dared to do this to her daughter. And in her expression, she clearly saw the intention to do something terrible to him. The heroine didn't know how to explain it properly, The tentacle marks actually looked like they were left by some kind of object. And if her mother continued to investigate, she would definitely call a doctor to look at the injury, and now the situation was developing very badly for her, and the secret of the werewolf was in danger. To begin with, she asked the older woman to calm down and listen to her. She assured her that no one had hurt her, and it was all done by her own free will. And a little embarrassed, the heroine said that she was really interested in this kind of intimacy. She had recently started a boyfriend, and just yesterday she had a chance to try it with him. The mother just stood there with her mouth open, not knowing what she was talking about, and the daughter continued, saying that after she tried it, it hurt a lot, and she realized that she was still a normal person. And at that moment, she stopped. The older woman quietly asked if everything she had just heard was true, and the heroine continued to say without hesitation that every word was true, and she was a normal person, and she had even managed to get a boyfriend, and her mother shouldn't remind her of this anymore. And if she still didn't believe it, they could come visit next week. To the heroine's surprise, the woman agreed to meet next week, and realizing her mistake, she immediately began to make excuses, claiming that it had been a long time since she had seen her and that she was too worried. The situation was actually that she had been dumped on her last blind date, got drunk in a bar and met Mr. Van, but of course her mother could not know this. In the meantime, she handed over the envelope, claiming that there was nothing to worry about. The Lee family was holding a reception next week, and she had planned to take her daughter with her at the beginning to make amends with her husband and mend relations between the two families. But now that her daughter has a boyfriend, they have to go show them off together, to prove that the daughter of this family is not so bad. Mrs. Lee was always talking about how good her son was, and now the woman wanted to see if he could find a new girlfriend so quickly. In the evening, she went to the institution to see the fake fiancé and told him the whole situation, concluding that if he did not show up for this appointment, her mother would become suspicious, and their plan might have some difficulties. The man agreed, adding that he could make it in the evening, but not until the morning, as he shouldn't forget about his transformation, to which she just laughed, as she knew that most of these receptions were only entertaining, and there was no need to stay overnight, so there shouldn't be any problems. The heroine wished him an easy job, adding that she should find time to come to him soon and discuss everything in case her mother decided to ask a stupid question. Van agreed, asking for a bit of a reaction from the contract, after which, exhaling heavily, he said he was willing to play along. But before he did, he had one more question for her, namely, whether she really wanted to play a couple of lovers with him. The woman didn't understand the question, so she answered positively, asking what was the point of her being here if she didn't want to be here. And after thinking about it for a few seconds, Van decided to say it straight. People in love don't call each other Miss and Mr., and now they are two, not at all like a couple. After recovering from the shock, the woman realized that it was true. They were more like partners than lovers, and that meant that they needed to change the way they addressed each other and start treating each other gently, just like people who love each other. The fake groom added that it was not only this. The feeling of coolness could be explained by the fact that they had not seen each other for a long time. But the feeling of intimacy cannot be faked. It can only be used in small things. In this case, they decided it would be good to give each other surnames, and the heroine suggested that he come up with something similar for her. And after thinking about it for a while, he said he would call her Xiao Zhu, meanwhile bringing his face closer to hers. This closeness confused the heroine a bit, and suddenly images of the past flashed in her eyes, where she and her furry friend were playing on a bright day, and how happy she was then. She grabbed her head, and Van started to worry, but after a moment the woman convinced him that everything was fine. She just had a sudden headache, and she remembered her childhood friend, and she felt as if the dog was talking, although it was impossible. In this case, the man offered Miss Han a massage to help her relax, and being a bit surprised by this skill, the woman lightly lay down on his lap, entrusting it to him. Relaxed, she claimed that Mr. Groom had forgotten about their agreement and called her Miss Han again, adding that no one could see them now anyway, and so it didn't really matter. The heroine said that he had just called her by her surname, which reminded her of her childhood days, and now she felt a little nostalgic. At that time, she loved to go play in the big yard because there was a very cute dog there. Hearing this, The man suddenly pressed harder than necessary, but she liked it, and the man apologized, saying that his hands were too heavy, and so he would try to do it lightly, adding to her words about her childhood. He asked her if she was a very popular child when she was young, and for some reason she only mentioned a dog, and so he wondered what was special about her. Hanju claimed that she was not like that when she was a child, when her family only cared about her brother's future, and everyone tried to woo her as a child and marry her off as soon as she was of age. Every time he wagged his tail and barked, it was as if it was for her. The dog was the only creature that could prove that the girl's personality also mattered, and that's why she likes dogs now. Listening to all this, Van realized that her memories had indeed blurred and changed. She didn't remember him talking to her when he was a wolf, and instead, her memory had turned everything into a more reasonable and normal process of human-animal communication, and under no circumstances could she be allowed to regain her memory. The day of the banquet came, and the couple went there together as agreed, and there she introduced him to her mother, who was beginning to evaluate the man, and he greeted her respectfully, introducing himself as her boyfriend. When she saw Van's smile, the heroine was embarrassed and noticed that her heart started pounding furiously, but she ignored it, arguing that she must have slept poorly for the last 2 days. Meanwhile, the mother praised her husband enthusiastically, saying that he was very tall and handsome, and yet her daughter had very good taste, and in a moment she saw the hosts talking to the guests and offered to go and say hello to them. While her mother went to the owners, the heroine wasted no time in pointing her finger at the guy, calling him her past fiancé, and also her childhood sweetheart in school, and his name was Li Chen Feng. Van suddenly remembered that he had heard her say this once before. One day when he was still a wolf, the girl had said that there were many reasons why she always came here, and that her father wanted to marry her off to an old man, regardless of what she wanted. She was constantly getting into trouble, and being bullied by a strange boy from her class. She couldn't know why they liked to chase her and call her names, and pull her hair, and tear up her textbooks, and it was very disturbing. Vovchik sincerely did not understand why she was treated this way, because she was obviously not a monster and had done nothing wrong, to which she assumed that she must simply not be hated. The book said that people will be hostile to someone who doesn't have the same perception as them, and he probably thought that she was not like ordinary girls, and that she was strange. The werewolf confirmed this, claiming that his parents had also left him here because he was born an animal, and her eyes lit up when she heard this, as she had just learned that he was actually a human and not a dog. The wolf went on to explain that, according to human researchers, since the meteorite hit the Earth, mutants have appeared on the Earth. Their original form is unstable, and therefore they can transform into other living and non-living life forms. The girl listened to all of this with rapt attention, and then asked if he could become a man again, and he confirmed it, and then assured her that it was time for the reverse transformation, and he became a boy again. When she saw the child, the girl was sincerely surprised, and her first words were a compliment that he was very cute, after which she added that it would be nice if he was her childhood favorite. Now, the woman was explaining that their main task tonight was to make her mother believe that they were in love, and it had nothing to do with that young Master Li, so they could just leave him out of it, since it was obvious that Van would not want to get involved with him. Mr. Li himself noticed the couple discussing him, and how she asked him to give him to her in case they ran into each other, so the owner took a drink with him and came over to say hello. The owner offered to talk, but the woman refused, saying that the relationship between them was too delicate now, and if he had a lot of free time, he should spend it with his fans. Mr. Li calmly told her that she was constantly forgetting that he had no female fans, and so he asked her to introduce him to her escort, and Van, without letting the heroine say a word, greeted her, saying beautifully that it didn't matter who he was, but Hanju hadn't had dinner yet tonight, so they shouldn't leave him for long. The woman listened to all this and was very enthusiastic, as one would expect from a professional, and if she had known in advance that it was all just professional skills, she would have thought that Mr. Van was jealous, and at that moment she noticed the satisfied mother out of the corner of her eye. Hanju confirmed this, and hugging the attendant, assured him that they would leave then, and would not disturb Mr. Li, at which point he suddenly jumped up and reached out to her angrily, with obvious malice. The woman intercepted his hand in time, and then asked him in a cold tone if he needed anything else, after which he turned to her and said that she was not at all cooperative. She had been like that since childhood, and it disgusted him. He thought that she would never panic and never flatter like the others. She would stand by him and move together. But for some reason, she was not paying attention to him all the time. And now the woman claimed that she did not understand what the conversation was about, and then she took the van and left. An hour passed, and the woman in the bathroom was washing her hands, thinking about which mom would be pleased, and the Lee family's son hadn't done anything wrong, so there wasn't much left to go, and it would be possible to go home, and it was necessary to leave before midnight, or else the van might turn. At that moment, another woman came in and asked for some of her time, introducing herself as Xian Tiange, and she asked if this was the same Hanju who was in the jewelry business. The heroine said that she had heard of Miss Xian for a long time and would be happy to help in any way, and she assured her that she wanted to ask for help with a trivial matter. She was planning to propose to her boyfriend, with whom she had been with for many years, and so she wanted to order a ring, but it was quite unusual, and so if she went to the store, she would definitely be rejected. Somewhat shyly, the woman explained that she needed to order a lot of rings with diameters ranging from 1 millimeter to 5 centimeters with a smooth change in size, and that was why she did not order it in the store, as she did not want to be asked about it in the store, and now she did not want to discuss it either, as everyone had their own secrets. The heroine was naturally curious about why she had to do so much, and whether it might mean that she had a lot of boyfriends, but she restrained her ardor and assured him that she would not ask, saying that she would wait for him in her free time, in her company, and then they would find a suitable model. Meanwhile, Wang was waiting for Han Ju in the hall. His body was a little restless, so he had to suppress it, and at that moment, the host of the reception approached him, assuring him that he was looking for him, as he had a serious conversation. Changing his tone to a colder one, Lee asked what the conditions were for him to cut all ties with Han Ju, adding that he didn't want to be like the evil mother-in-law from the TV shows and use money to send people away, but just thought he might need it. And as a bartender, Van would like to have his own establishment, and so if he breaks off the relationship with Han, he will immediately hand it over to him. At this point, the husband interrupted him, saying that he did not understand how one of their establishments could be compared to the entire Han family. This reaction worried Lee, and his guesses were confirmed by Van, who assured him that unfortunately he was not that stupid, and if he accepted his offer, he would not be able to get more than one job. But if he took good care of Miss Han, he would become the family's future son-in-law. And so, if Mr. Lee wanted him to keep Han Ju, in which case he would have to offer something more than the value of the Han family, this behavior confused him, but he was reassured by the fact that he had prepared for all eventualities. At that moment, the heroine came in, asking what they were talking about without her, adding that time was running out and they had to leave, but Lee stopped her and took out his phone where the recorder was on all the time, and included the moment where it was said that Van was going to become the Han family's son-in-law for the sake of their property. The owner turned to the heroine, asking if she recognized the voice of the guy who was now standing next to her, and pointing out that he was not really who he wanted to appear to be, but rather wanted to take possession of their family's property. The woman briefly replied that she knew it herself, and then took Van's hand and walked to the exit. Lee began to explain in despair that the man next to her did not really love her, but was only using her for his own nefarious purposes, and she could not leave it all like that. Hearing this, she froze in place, and after a moment gave her host a cold look, asking if Mr. Lee had told her because he liked her, adding that it was none of his business and that he shouldn't pry where he wasn't asked, and now he was overstepping his bounds. In the parking lot, Han summarized that more or less the problem was solved, and now it was time to go home. And now she wondered where her companion lived, as it could be on the way to her house, and since she had already been drinking, she would not be able to drive, and therefore it was time to find a sober driver. Van assured her that there was no need to look for anyone, as he had a driver's license and would simply drive her home and call a taxi, and they set off. The woman thinking about how she could help him get home faster, and then claimed that he had already taken off work, so he could just come and stay at her place, as she had a free guest room. The man said that Miss Van did not seem to remember what had happened not long ago, namely that he had bad intentions towards their family, and that he was a bad guy who was taking advantage of her situation for his own selfish purposes. The heroine asked him if he really thought so and received an affirmative answer. The werewolf claimed that this way one could easily get a huge fortune, and this is exactly the opportunity everyone dreams of, and therefore it was stupid to refuse it. The woman confirmed this, adding that such a marriage would not be suitable for lazy people, since if someone wants to have power, they must first improve their performance and prove their success. This was not the answer he expected, so he asked her if she really didn't understand what he was talking about, and if she was worried that after the marriage, half of her property would be taken by a man who didn't even love her. Han assured her that she understood, but if Mr. Van could talk about it so calmly, it proved that what he had said to Mr. Lee was intentional, and she didn't think he was really interested in her family's property. But she decided to ask him if she really wanted to buy his marriage for money. Would he agree to it? He was somewhat surprised by this question, but he would have agreed, since he did not understand where feelings ended and money began, and such thoughts had come to him since childhood, when he unexpectedly heard a conversation between researchers. They discussed the Han family as if their money was supporting their research, and they were their main sponsors. They always gave the most money, and it seemed as if they were really supporting their program of captive holding. They heard that these subjects had also been bought by the Han family, and otherwise it would not have been possible to kill people at the research base. And this group could be seen as monsters, in the form of people, and therefore no one cared whether they died or lived. The next day, he and the girl were sitting in the sun again. He didn't want to doubt her, but she seemed to be from a big family, so he asked her if she had heard of the Han Company, and she said that she had not only heard of it, but also knew it well, because it was her family's company. Suddenly, the present-day Han snapped out of his memories, asking what he was thinking about so deeply that he didn't answer her, and he apologized, assuring her that he was too focused on the road, and therefore asked her to remind him what she had said. The heroine, meanwhile, relaxed in the back seat, saying that she generally agreed with what he was saying, and that work gives you more than a partner. But sometimes she too would like to feel as desperate as a moth flying into a flame. This comparison tensed the man up, and he claimed that the sensation of a moth flying into a flame was not fun at all, especially when the difference in strength was too great. Hearing this, the woman assured me that everything was fine. She had no strength before, but now she was completely confident in herself, and so there had to be at least something she could do for her partner. Suddenly, Van whispered, "Being exhausted is the same as living in chaos," and then said that they had already arrived and it was time for her to go. And as she got out, she thanked him for that and suggested that they park and come in, as they had too little time to get close. The man assured her that it was very dangerous to invite a man into her home, and therefore asked her to respect herself, to which she began to convince him, not understanding why he was so insistent, that they had already slept in the same room before, and therefore she should not worry about it. Van suddenly spoke in a voice other than his own, asking her to leave him alone and to leave as soon as possible, and the heroine realized that he had started to transform before his time. Seeing this, Han began to worry, and so she instantly covered him, and in a moment ran home with him. The guard was surprised to see his lady, and something running near her, but still decided to leave it at that. When the woman reached the right floor by elevator, she breathed a sigh of relief, claiming that her house was under closed management and therefore no one would come. She was shocked enough to see the tentacles, but she never thought that there was something like that and it would really turn into a polar bear. He began to growl in embarrassment, and she noticed that he could not speak in this form, and then added that he would probably eat raw meat, to which he began to growl in anger. Opening the door, the heroine warned him not to litter anywhere, and the rest could be discussed after he came to his senses. And once inside, he noticed a lot of dog dolls, visibly surprised, so much so that he could love them. Inside, she said that he should not chew on dolls, and then assured him that he could sleep in the guest room tonight. And since she had ordered a large 2 5/10 meter bed, he should be able to fit in there. The bear suddenly rose up on its hind legs, trying to say that it could push the bed, but the heroine just smiled at it, adding that it was worth ordering rolls in the morning, or maybe just salmon, and then picked up the phone and ordered the highest quality salmon, and went to her room. The werewolf was left alone in the room, and he realized that he could not sleep on the bed, so he tried to squeeze between it and the wardrobe, but nothing happened, so he decided to stay asleep on the floor. When he was alone, he blamed himself for causing her trouble again, and if this continued, sooner or later she would definitely get hurt, just like that time. As a child, when he found out that she was from the family that sponsored these experiments, the boy attacked her, asking if she even understood why he was enduring all this. He trusted the girl, but she was still on the side of those who wanted to hurt him, so he hit her. But the heroine still asked him to calm down, as she did not understand who really wanted to hurt him. He didn't believe her, and still incredibly angry, he said that she appeared here very suddenly, and it was strange because it was obvious that people like him are disgusting and no one can like them. And there must be another reason why she was talking to him, at which point his body began to turn into something scary, and the boy demanded to know what her purpose was. The girl was in a state of shock because she was not believed, and because of what she was seeing right in front of her, she tried to speak, despite the hand that grabbed her neck, but he did not let her finish. The werewolf demanded answers, whether she wanted to experiment on him as well, or just look at the monster up close, accusing her family that if it weren't for them, he wouldn't have been given so many drugs. And if it weren't for them, he wouldn't have been in so much pain, and his fate could have been different. Suddenly, he started crying, and the girl realized that he actually thought that if he killed her, he would be able to take revenge on the people who treated him badly. The werewolf said that he didn't want to kill her. He was just in a lot of pain, so much pain that he didn't know why he was in so much pain. And at that moment he let her go, and his horrible body appendages disappeared. He knew he should hate her, but he couldn't do it, and he wished that he wasn't hated either. The girl heard this and hugged him, adding a moment later that she would help him escape, and in a shocked state he stood up, and the happy girl repeated that she wanted to help him escape. All she could hear was a voice telling her that she had to become a great person, that she couldn't make a mistake, otherwise she would shame her family. And now she couldn't resist, and she shouldn't think about what was right and wrong. When she opened her eyes, she saw herself drowning in mucus, and the monster said that she had to obey the orders of her elders, and then began to repeat one word that ordered her to obey. At that moment, horrified, she woke up. Now the heroine was in her bed, sweating all over. At this time, she constantly has a dream about a monster wrapping around her, and sometimes it seems that it's all hallucinations, and so now it was time to go drink water. On her way to the kitchen, she bumped into something big and soft, and realized it was Van. Surprised that he was sleeping under her door, she walked over him, convinced that he was sleeping like a log, and even if she stepped on him, he wouldn't wake up. Talking about it, it became clear that people who had mutated into animals could not speak. But for some reason, she still thought that animals could still talk just like humans. But in a moment, she dismissed these thoughts, assuring herself that she could not confuse her feelings for the dog with Mr. Van. Lee was right then, that he was doing all this only for money, not because he liked her, so she should not have gotten her hopes up. But now she could barely contain herself, and she was bored with it. So when she turned around, she realized that even if he had no feelings for her, he was very fluffy right now. And then she fell on him, asking if Mr. Bear would mind if she breathed on him a few times. Meanwhile, he was already awake. Van had missed the best moment to wake up, and now he just had to endure. He didn't know what this woman was doing now, but if he opened his eyes, they would probably both be very embarrassed. So he decided to just play dead, and she would leave as soon as she got tired. Sitting next to him, the heroine suddenly realized that his clothes had torn on him when he turned into a bear, and now she wondered if he was a male or a female, and this was a good chance to check it out. When the bear felt that something was wrong, it was too late. The woman had already found what she was looking for and was touching it. The man realized who was near him. She was a real demon, and she really treated him like an animal. In this case, he had no choice but to crush her with his foot, which she lifted, and she, staying under him, thought he was already awake. But when she called out, the bear did not answer, and it looked like he had just turned over. The heroine began to touch his fur, and felt warmth and softness. At that moment she was already sleepy, and half asleep she said that she liked him. Hearing this, the bear instantly rose, demanding a clearer answer, but she was already sound asleep. and the bear still could not speak. In a few minutes, he suddenly turned back into a man, and now he was naked, in the arms of the heroine, and he realized that he was already used to the feeling of losing control of himself. The woman woke up in her bed, and when she got up, she was very surprised that she was here, because last night she remembered exactly that she had fallen asleep on the floor. But for some reason she was in her bed, and her first thoughts were that she had dreamed it all. Hearing strange noises in the kitchen, she decided to check it out and saw Van slicing up the fresh fish she had ordered yesterday, and the heroine asked him how he slept last night, noticing in a moment that he had already become a man again. He assured her that everything happened the same way as with the tentacles. It appeared and disappeared very quickly, and was almost imperceptible, in which case the heroine wondered if it was possible that because the transformations occurred earlier, their duration could be reduced, but since there were only 2 such situations, it was too early to draw conclusions. Van said that he had managed to sign for the delivery of this salmon, and it was bigger than he expected. The human body just couldn't eat that much, and so he decided to take over the kitchen, adding a moment later if she had any wishes on what she would like to eat for lunch.